Hello, this is Mary.
This is Debbie.
This is Pamela.
And we're with Pearls of the Soul. And today we've been sitting around magic chattering, and we've been talking about grief in a very raw way. And Deb has been doing some work with some grief counseling and is certifying to be a
Grief recovery specialist.
And so with that said, I want you to listen to Deb a minute and have Deb explain to us exactly what grief is, and then we'll just kind of table chat from there.
This past year, I lost my mom and my dad and my sister, and then much other stress came, and I started with foggy brain, and I decided I needed to go to grief recovery. And I was very interested because grief isn't about just losing someone. It's about relationships, which relationships has been a struggle all my life. And relationships are lots of hurt and pain, and that's what grief is. So Pam and I have been going through a lot this year, and we both have realized that the children that we raised or had partially raised, we loved and adored, and all of a sudden life changes and they turn a different direction, and that's real grief, gut-wrenching grief. Don't you think, Pam?
Yeah, I do. In my case, it was when my husband died. My stepkids decided to sue me for for everything I had. So that was something. The grief of losing my husband was devastating. And then to have to worry about my assets and what am I going to do was devastating. So we're still going to court. It was my stepchildren, but they were in my life for 27 years. So it's like that part of the family just really stabbed me in the back, and it gave me a lot of grief.
I'd like to jump in here. Grief, we've talked about this with our little chatter between the three of us. Grief is not just, I guess, stuck in the area of somebody dying. It's like Deb and Pamela both said about family members and that dynamics changing, but it also can be grief around job relationships, losing a job, or even getting a new job.
Losing a job, losing a pet, losing a friend that you thought was a friend, and all of a sudden,
estrangements.
They show a different friend.
yeah. And, there's just so much that we grieve throughout our lives. And, going back even to as children, we're imprinted with so much stuff.
So much.
And so as children, as we're imprinted, we carry this on to our adult decisions. And I think it all starts, and Deb and I and Pamela were talking about this, in our childhood, where we aren't taught to deal with grief. We're taught just to sweep it under the rug, or if our emotions make somebody uncomfortable, then you don't address them. And then they become just buried inside of ourselves. And until we are taught the tools to really deal with our shit, so to speak.
Yes.
Then, it just remains there unresolved and develops into disease of some kind. And whether it's cancer, diabetes, whatever it is, it becomes a real manifestation of that grief. And thank goodness for people like Deb who've gone through the program, who understand how to cope and how she can teach you new learning skills. I've learned so much just talking to her about different areas of my own life that I never would have even related to grief, that I thought was just bad behavior. And now I realize that anchor was grief.
It was grief. It was hurt and pain. And we get that in our cells from our DNA, because, I look at my parents, and my mother lost her sister very, very young. She was only 10, and they both fell in the river, and Angel pulls my mom out, but her sister didn't get pulled out. And she lived with the guilt of, why did you let your younger sister die? You shouldn't have lived. Well, that came from her aunts telling her that, where that isn't how you grieve.
Yeah. What a sad thing for a child to have to live with their whole life at 10 years old. You've just lost your sister.
Yeah.
But now you've also been blamed for that. But then you're also faced with the guilt of, why did I live? And, that survivor's guilt.
The survivor's guilt.
And, it's just at 10 years old, how do you even cope? If we can't cope at 60. I can't sometimes. Yeah. And now that I have a different idea of what death looks like, I realize it's just that transition, and it doesn't seem as scary or as serious. But, for a child, and I think we need to start with our children. Our children are just learning or not learning, the right habits or the right way to think, and it becomes
they get
dysfunctional
hurt.
adults
they
in
get
relationships.
Hurt with a friend at school. They come home and saying they didn't want to play with me anymore.
Right.
And a parent often will say, let's just have a cookie and make it all better.
It's not important.
It doesn't make it better, because you've got to be able to understand the hurt and the pain and be able to express and make yourself in a better place. Mm-hmm. And the forgiving isn't from forgiving that friend that hurt you. It's forgiving that it hurt you enough, but expressing, you really, really hurt me. Maybe not to that person, but in your thoughts and letting your child express, what did it feel like? What happened? And then saying, if you were to forgive, would it look more like, I don't want to feel this anymore. I want to be happy and move forward. I don't want to feel like these kids are just taking and taking and taking from me, and I'm nothing now. I want to move forward from here because I am something. I am special. And forgive yourself for feeling the hurt and the pain.
Yeah. I had a situation come into my life with a 3-year-old. She's been acting out in class and actually got suspended from her preschool. And as her mother went in and investigated some stuff, the teacher had changed throughout the year. And the child then started acting out at the same time the new teacher appeared. And nobody has talked to that little girl about how she felt about the abandonment of that teacher. And when the mother confronted the heads of the school about this, they said, "Oh, that doesn't have any bearing on it." And
That's everything.
I'm like, yes, it does, And I told them, you need to talk to your child about this abandonment of losing this teacher.
Yes.
Because it is grief. It is her loss.
Yes.
Even though to us, it just is a teacher, to her, it was her mentor.
Yes.
And at 3 years old, whether you're 3, 10, 18, 30, 60, the nervous system doesn't know that difference.
It doesn't know.
So she's learning right now, unless they get that reconciled, that she can't trust people to show up.
Yeah. And we lose trust very, very young when things happen to us, and that turns into resentment, that turns into bitterness, and before you know it, you're living with those feelings and emotions, and you're not even knowing that that's what you're living with.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, that's just crazy. Well, this is Mary.
This is Debbie.
This is Pamela.
And we're with Pearls of the Soul, and we wish you a fabulous week.